Hello, everyone, and welcome. Tell us where you're based and what your holiday plans are. Are you traveling? Are you staying in town? I am going to be spending Christmas in Park City, Utah, so I'm very excited about that, up in a cabin. How about you, Ashutosh? Where are you going to be?
I am going to be here at my home in Hawaii. We have family coming in from the East Coast for a couple weeks.
Awesome.
So excited for that.
Yeah, and you just moved there, so it's probably better that you stay put this month.
Yeah. Yep.
Very cool. Yeah, I'm looking forward to just getting away and going to a mountain and doing some writing. I find that being out closer to nature kind of helps my creativity sometimes. So that's the plan. All right. Welcome, everyone. I'm going to get started with a brief introduction. But first, some housekeeping. Today's workshop will be recorded and shared along with the slides. So if you have any questions, please use the Q&A button at the bottom right of your window to submit a question, and Ashutosh will address them at the end. So now to introduce today's speaker, Ashutosh Priyadarshy is the founder of Sunsama, a daily planner for busy professionals that helps you plan out a focused workday by pulling together your tasks from all of your tools. Very cool. Ashutosh has spent most of the last decade building and launching productivity hardware and software, and his goal is to build products that help us navigate our work and life mindfully and intentionally, which is what I love. So this goes beyond just the work you do. So today he's sharing tips on how to be less overwhelmed at work. All right, Ashutosh, I will pass it over to you.
Cool. Thanks for the introduction. So yeah, I am Ashutosh. I am one of the founders of Sunsama, and as mentioned, it's a daily planner. And over the past 8 years that I've been working on Sunsama, I've had a chance to personally talk to, I think, over 10,000 people in chat, meetings, video calls, all on this idea of how do you plan your workday? How do you navigate your workday? And I've had a chance to see lots of different things, obviously, that people have tried, what's worked, what hasn't worked, sort of common reasons why people have felt overwhelmed. And my goal here today is to help you design a better workday. And I'll get into what I mean by a better workday in a minute. And I'm hoping to give you techniques and tactics that will work regardless of what tools you use or how you plan your day. If you like to do it in a journal where you write it down, or you like to do it in a text pad or a project management tool, whatever it is, I'm trying to sort of bring you the best practices that I've observed in talking with thousands of people about that. So let me jump into sort of what I see as the biggest problem with our workday, and it's this feeling of just being overwhelmed. There's a few reasons for this. Well, there's a lot of reasons for this, but the big ones that I noticed are it's easy to get distracted. We're using tools that have distraction built in, Slack, email, all sorts of other things with variable and intermittent rewards. We're trying to do an impossible amount, and I'm going to dig into this each day. And I think that this is the thing that is happening for most people, is that they start each day trying to do way more than they possibly can, and that sort of sets them up for failure. And then the third thing is we're working all the time, and one of the joys of work being more digital, being more remote, being more async, is that we can work from anywhere, anytime, as long as we have our laptop. And what tends to happen is we end up kind of working almost the whole day, starting in the morning, and then, fitting in, meals and dinners and exercise and family time in between work. And we never really get a chance to stop and shut down from work in a day other than when we go to bed. And it just sort of suffocates our ability to have any sense of leisure. So let's dive into this idea of doing an impossible amount of work. I think it's sort of at the crux of the question of why we feel overwhelmed, almost at a philosophical level, if you will. And one thing I've noticed is that that's sort of a characteristic of very ambitious people. They love what they do, and so as a result, they can always do more. Whether it's do a better job with something they're writing or something they're building or something they're presenting. There's always more to do, and they have that interest to do it. And then there's also this feeling of work. Successful work actually begets more work. So if you have a business or a product, once you get it out into the world and people like it, instead of having less work, you now have more work. You have more customers to support, more clients to talk to, more things that they want to get done. And so you sort of exist in this state where work can never be finished. And that's one of the reasons you feel overwhelmed, because in your mind, you can kind of feel all of the different things you want to do, but you have this limited resource, which is your time. And so what kind of ends up happening is most people, they go through their workday kind of in this state, living in this state of daily failure, where they say, okay, I have an infinite number of things to do, and I got a few things done today, but when I compare the few things I got done today against all the things I possibly could do, I sort of end the day feeling like, oh, like what really got done? I didn't get enough done. And you just kind of get in this cycle of feeling like you never got enough done and you didn't really have a successful workday. So what are some possible solutions to infinite work? The simplest one is you could just give up. You could switch careers, do something that's more time bounded. I don't know what that would be. Maybe you could work in a factory where you just simply get paid for your time. But that's obviously not a reasonable answer to this question. You could try and work faster. So you could try to do more in less time. And then the third thing you could do is try to change the rules of the game so that you somehow are you're working against your list of sort of this infinite backlog, but in a way where you're finding success, accomplishment, and fulfillment each day. And that's really what I'm going to talk about when I talk about how we're going to design our work days. But let's kind of dive into this idea of working faster, because this is sort of what I think most people have as their default idea of productivity. When you ask people, what does it mean to be productive? What does it mean to be more productive? They're going to tell you that they want to do more things in less time. And this is kind of an idea that makes sense and grows out of our ideas of productivity that were developed during the Industrial Revolution, when we were really thinking about productivity in the sense of factories producing stuff, where it's like, okay, we have machines that we're trying to get to do more things, produce more widgets per hour, basically. And this approach works really well for machines, but it doesn't work that well for people, because we're more time bounded, we're energy bounded, and the thing we care about and the thing that brings us fulfillment isn't just the raw number of things we're able to produce in units of time, but the feeling of fulfillment and enjoyment and satisfaction we get out of our work. And for most of the people here listening to this, you're probably not doing what it is that you do just purely for the money. You're probably doing it for some sort of satisfaction at an intellectual, emotional level. And so the rules we need to apply for productivity for us as humans are different for machines. And I'll get into this later, but I'm not trying to put down this approach to productivity entirely. It is valuable when you have systems where there's a fixed bounded amount of work. And I think actually a really good example of this is your email. And I'm going to dig into that later. So let's talk about how we might change the rules. If we have, this situation where we have an infinite amount of work to do, and that's not going to change. So the trick, I think, is to turn that infinite amount of work into finite work that you feel like you're making progress against each day, each week, each month. And, instead of comparing yourself against, did I make progress against this infinite list of work? If you can make progress against a finite list, you're going to feel a lot better. You're going to feel a lot more fulfilled. The other sort of change we're going to make is we're going to optimize for our own internal state and our feelings rather than this default idea of productivity, which is like widgets produced per hour. I'm using widgets as a general, call it number of tasks, whatever you want to call it. And so what we're really trying to do is rewrite our idea of productivity, but for human beings that have feelings and emotions and are looking for fulfillment and satisfaction over just raw production. So now let's actually get into it and talk about the real techniques that you're going to use for planning out your workday. And so for me, this kind of describes what I'm looking for when I talk about sort of changing the rules. For me, my idea of being productive is having a calm, focused, and fulfilling workday. And so what does that mean? I want to be able to do meaningful work every day. My definition of meaningful work will be different than yours. Personally, for me, I like to build things that make people a better version of themselves. So in my case, it's software. I like to avoid bullshit work, stuff that drains me and tires me, and that I don't find valuable. I like to focus deeply. I think that this is something that is starting to get more popular with books like Deep Work. But this idea that if you can really get into something and focus deeply, for an hour, 2 hours, 4 hours, if you can, you just feel a sense of flow and satisfaction. And I think that that's really key as we talk about sort of modulating our internal state and our emotional state as we go through our workday. And then the other two things for me are I want a sustainable workload. I don't want to feel like I'm going to just burn out and get exhausted. And I also want my work days to actually end so that I have time for other things that are important to me. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is actually go through the process of planning out sort of an example workday and start to illustrate some of the principles that you want to keep in mind when you're planning a day that will help you feel calm, focused, and fulfilled. So the first thing you can do, and you can do this in a paper journal, you can do it in a text file, you can do it anywhere you can write things down. So in my example, and this is, before I made Sunsama, the way I used to plan my days was just in a little text file that I had each day. And so the first and most important thing you're going to do is write down your most important work. So in my example day today, I want to write a blog post that explains a new feature that I built for customers. And, this is my chance to say like, okay, this is like something that's meaningful. This is a kind of task that I enjoy. All right, it's on my list. Okay, so that should be fairly easy. And then you're going to add everything else. And this is where you're going to start seeing the tension. You're going to start feeling like, oh, okay, things are a little more overwhelming. There's probably work in here that you find more draining, work that's less enjoyable, meetings, etc. And you start to see that tension. But a feature of a well-planned day is that it's comprehensive, and it includes not just your sort of really valuable work, but your obligations, the stuff you need to do to keep, your business running, or your work, keep your colleagues happy. And so you'll notice that I've got the meetings in here. I also have something I want to call out attention to, which is I've set aside time to actually go through my inboxes. I think one really big mistake people make when they're planning out their day is they forget to include that meetings are actually going to take up real time. It sounds silly to say that, but I've talked to thousands of people, and they want to do things like they want to spend the whole day writing a blog post, but they also need to somehow attend 6 meetings, and so that's not realistic. And so what we're really trying to do here as we go through this process of planning out our day step by step is try to get a realistic idea of all the things we're going to actually do today. So we're going to write our blog posts. We're going to go through all of our inboxes. We're going to go to some meetings. And we have these other 2 things. We're going to read some ideas that were sent to us in a proposal, etc. And so as we continue to try to have that calm and focused workday that's realistic and achievable, one thing that's really valuable to do is to estimate your workload. So here I have sort of annotated each task on my list with the number of hours that I think it's going to take me. I've tried to be sort of not too optimistic. So I'm going to spend 2.5 hours on this blog post, 1.5 hours on my inboxes. I've got a couple of meetings. It's going to take me a half hour to read and think through this proposal. And then I have some documents I need to review. It'll take me an hour. So when I add that all up, that's about 8 hours of work. So if you're looking at this as a person who hasn't, done a lot of detailed planning of your workday, you might think, okay, this is like one workday. I could probably do all of this. In my experience and in what I've seen is that this is what I would consider a very ambitious workday. If you think, your work is going to take you 8 hours of focus time, that typically sort of expands into, I would say, like 11 or so hours of sort of being in the office. When you factor in, taking a break for lunch, getting up to walk, drinking water, going to the bathroom, getting tired. So this 8-hour workload is really quite a long day. I think in my experience, personally, this would take me about like 11 hours of being in the office. So the next thing I like to do is start stripping away things that I don't think I'll actually be able to get done. And so my rule of thumb is, let's say you want to be sort of in the office from 9 to 6. It's kind of a reasonable work day for most people, take an hour for lunch, etc. And so what I like to shoot for is about the amount of focused work that I plan for in a day is about 75% of the time that I'll be in the office. So what I've done is I've just cut out these last 2 things that were on the list and just said, I'm not going to be able to do those today. Like, it's not going to get done. They'll need to get done tomorrow or another day or not at all, which is even better. And so now you can see I have this 6.5 hour day. And now we've kind of arrived at a point where we have a work day that's planned out, that's reasonable and achievable. And you can probably actually get all of these things done today. And if you get them done, you kind of end the day feeling like, hey, I set these goals for myself. I got them done. I finished it. I feel good. I feel satisfied. I feel fulfilled. And that's a really nice sort of emotional state to end the day on. And for me, I found that if I can consistently feel like each day I did what I wanted to do, it makes the next day easier. I wake up feeling like, okay, I'm excited to do this again. Conversely, if I sort of continually fall short of all the things I want to do each day, I just feel overwhelmed. I feel stressed, and that doesn't help me get things done. Instead, it slows me down even further. So what we're trying to do here is really reduce the amount of things that we're trying to do so that we end each day feeling sort of victorious. And that's what I'm really talking about when I say we're kind of trying to change the rules and re-engineer our sort of plan for each day and our expectations. And then the last thing I'll say about this is one thing I've sort of consistently observed is that the shorter somebody's to-do list is, the more that they tend to get done. So when you have this is a great example. You have four items that can actually get done. But when you have a list of things that's like, let's say 10 items long, and it's not actually realistic to get it done, what tends to happen is you kind of know in the back of your head, like, oh, I'm not going to actually get all of this stuff done today. And so you kind of move through your day a little more passively, and you're like, well, it's not actually all going to get done, so whatever. You just move slower. But when you give yourself this goal of, okay, here's the 4 things I think I can actually get done today, you tend to move through your day with a little bit, I want to say like a little bit more pep in your step. You're like, okay, like if I stay focused, I can actually get all of this done and I can feel successful at the end of the day. So shorter to-do lists, shorter daily plans are not going to sort of hold you back. In fact, you probably get more done. Okay, and then the other 2 things I like to do. I like to set a shutdown time so I know when I'm going to stop working. So here I've just put a reminder that I'm working from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. You might find it useful to actually put that on your calendar as either a recurring event or each day, so that you're like, okay, I need to stop and move on. There's, again, if you kind of look at what we're trying to do here at a high level, we're trying to actually impose more constraints on our workday and try to work and succeed within those constraints. And so I find it really helpful to know, like, okay, this is the time I'm going to stop working. And when that time comes around, I can be like, okay, this was the plan. I'm going to step away. I'm going to do other things. And I think what happens is if you let work expand to fill basically all of your waking hours, you just kind of work a bit more passively, with less focus. And then you also don't leave any time for sort of the rest of your life. So it's really valuable to pick a shutdown time and try to adhere to that. You're just going to feel a lot better if you're not spending your entire day working, thinking about work. So building in, kind of substantial chunks in your day for not working is really, really valuable. Okay, and then the last thing I like to do is I like to actually figure out when I'm going to do things. You can just put your tasks in the order that you're going to work on them. Or you can say like, hey, these are the specific times I'm going to work on things. And I think the important thing here is to make it flow for you. Everybody is going to be different. I know there's a lot of talk about, oh, you should do your most important like creative work first thing in the morning. That's never worked for me. I'm not strong enough to to do that, I just really want to know like what's in my inboxes, and I want to just get that out of the way, and not have to sort of have that lingering over me the whole day. So I like to just get through all my emails and inboxes and Slack notifications and Notion notifications as the first thing of the day. And then I feel like, okay, now I have kind of the rest of the day to just dive into things, and nobody is sort of knocking at my door for me. That might not work for you. You might actually find that you do your creative work best in the morning, and you can do your inboxes and sort of your more work chores, if you will, later in the day. So kind of figure out what works for you. But the other really interesting thing that happens when you figure out the order in which you're going to do things is you can now, basically from the moment you start working that day till the moment you're done, is you can kind of you can stay in a flow state the whole day. What tends to happen when people don't know what they're going to work on next after they finish a task or a meeting is they'll come back from a meeting, they'll sit down at their desk, and they'll check their email and their Slack and their Twitter, and they'll just kind of cycle through those tabs over and over and again until they're like, oh gosh, I should do something. And knowing what you're going to do next and where your attention is supposed to be kind of removes that sort of lost time where you're just like mindlessly scrolling but your work tools. So I find it really helpful to just know like, okay, this is the plan for today. Like I'm doing this, then I'm doing this, then I'm doing that. And then I just can get into execution mode. I can get a sense of flow and focus, and it just makes my day feel better for me. So that's it. This is, if you had a daily plan that looks like this, like I've said, I've seen thousands of people's daily plans. You would have a really well-planned day. And as you can see, it doesn't take a lot to do that, but it does take effort and intention, and it's going to take 5 to 10 minutes each evening or each day to actually plan out your day. So those are some of the like specific techniques I use for planning out a good work day. So to review some of the kind of elements of a well-planned day is it should be comprehensive. It should include like the important work you want to do, but also that sort of work that you have to do, like your emails. You should actually be setting aside time for that instead of trying to just hope that it somehow fits in. And I think for most people that I've seen, email takes at least an hour a day. On my team, I know even the engineers who have the least emails and notifications, they're still spending about 45 minutes a day responding to comments and notifications and sort of collaborating with colleagues there. So it sucks that an hour of your day could go into that, but you're going to feel a lot less overwhelmed if you accept that and sort of schedule that into your day. We talked a lot about your day should flow well so that you can stay focused. You don't need to keep wondering about what you should be doing. And then probably the most important part of a well-planned day is that it should be reasonable and achievable. Your goal for the day should be something you can actually get done so that you can end the day feeling successful. Because that's going to create sort of that virtuous cycle where you say like, okay, like I really did what I wanted. I feel good, and I'm going to go back to it tomorrow. And then I think a well-planned day is one that actually ends. If your workday just goes on and on and on and on until you fall asleep, that's a sign of a not well-planned day. And then I just want to take a moment to kind of talk about another common sort of mistake I see, which is people are really accustomed to using project management tools, Trello, Asana, Notion, and they're really good at planning out projects. But your day isn't a project. Your day is this like really small, specific, time-bounded thing that you're trying to figure out what you're going to do. And so when you're planning out projects, you're sort of trying to figure out, okay, here's everything you could do. Here's the order we're going to do them. Here's like what's important, here's not. And you're really trying to sort of explore like a large possibility space. Whereas when you're planning out today, you want to focus on what you can actually do and what you're going to actually do today. So there's that small distinction. You're really focusing on what you're actually going to do, and not what you want to do. And those two things are very different. And I think a lot of people, they spend a lot of time sort of trying to do everything that they want to do and not realizing that that's not realistic. And so it can be really helpful to have your daily planning tool be separate from your project management tool or your project planning tool, just so that you're not feeling kind of overwhelmed by that. So you can use a piece of paper, a notepad, a journal, a daily planning tool, instead of trying to do that in your project tool where you're going to see, dozens or hundreds of different tasks for the next weeks or months or sprints or quarters or whatever. So that now we've talked about kind of the basics of how you might plan a good day. If you want to supercharge your daily plan, let's talk about a few techniques you can use. If you have a lot of meetings, one thing you should do is time box. So people who have a lot of meetings, they often find it hard to find any time to actually get work done in between those meetings. And so one thing you should do is say like, okay, between these meetings, I'm gonna work on this thing. Like this is when I'm gonna do my emails, or this is when I'm gonna review this document, or this is when I'm gonna write this blog post. And so be really specific about when you're going to do things. And that's gonna help you sort of stay on plan, stay in the zone, and also be more realistic about what you can get done. Because if you have a day, let's say with 5 meetings that are kind of scattered throughout the day, you actually have less sort of space to dive in and do things than if you have, 3 meetings that are all back to back at the start of the day. You might actually find that you can get more done on a day like that. Another thing, if you work in kind of a client or customer facing role, and you need to sort of optimize for responsiveness, one thing I've seen that works really well is to plan your day twice. So in the evening, when you're finishing up your day, or at night before you go to bed, you should plan out your day and kind of think of that as a best case. Like, okay, if nothing else comes up that's really, really important, this is what I'm planning to do. And then in the morning, you can sort of check your inboxes real quick and see like, okay, did something really important come in? If so, let me adjust my plan. And that way you have the flexibility to be responsive to clients and customers. But if there's nothing sort of urgent that's come in, you can just kind of execute on your plan. I also find it helpful because my work is scattered in lots of different tools, as you can see in this picture. I like to have URLs to each of the tasks that I'm going to work on. And I also like to keep track of how much time I'm actually working on things to sort of hone my estimates. Obviously, in this picture, this is Sunsama, where I actually do this. There's loads of tools out there, and you can even build these things yourself in your notepad. So I'm not here to sell you Sunsama, obviously, just the techniques to actually planning out a good workday. So let's get into some common issues with estimating or planning a good day. One thing people often run into is that estimating tasks is really difficult, and that's true. It's super hard to get estimations right, but it's something that if you do it consistently as part of planning your day, and also keep track of how long things actually take you, you get a lot better very quickly in just a couple weeks, especially with the types of tasks that you often do. So just practice. And I think that getting better at estimating your workload is one of the easiest ways to feel less overwhelmed, because you start to get a sense of, how much of your day work takes up. So when somebody sends you an email saying like, hey, can you whatever, can you like review this document? You can be like, oh, this is actually going to take me 30 minutes. And that's a significant portion of my, 6.5 hours of focused work in a day. And so it kind of also empowers you to say no to things, because you have a recognition of how expensive they are to you. And I mentioned this earlier, but one thing that works for me is I like to start with my more predictable tasks, like emails or more sort of just kind of simple procedural stuff. That helps me feel like I'm making progress on my day, staying on schedule. And when I stay on schedule, I definitely feel less overwhelmed, as opposed to if I do something that's unpredictable, like build a new product feature and it takes me 4 hours instead of 2 hours. Now I'm 2 hours behind and I have all this other stuff to do. And now I just feel super overwhelmed. So in terms of reducing overwhelm, it helps to kind of start your day with the more predictable tasks, bounded tasks. Another common issue I hear that we talked about briefly, which is people feel like they have a lot of fires come up at work that they need to put out. And by fires, I mean urgent and important work that was unexpected. One really interesting thing that happens when you're intentional about planning your day is you now have a comparison point. So when that urgent and important email comes in, you can compare it against the things that are already on your list and say, like, is this actually that important? And is it more important than the things I plan to do? If you don't take the time to be intentional about what you want to do, everything that comes in at you feels like, oh, this is urgent and this is important and I should work on it now. So again, that's kind of why I recommend planning twice. You kind of plan your best case in the evening, and then in the morning, if something comes up, you can kind of adjust your plan. And another thing I see is when things come up, like there's an issue that, if there's a bug or somebody needs something at the last minute, people try to do that and everything else that they had planned. Again, when we're talking about planning a day that's reasonable, achievable, and bounded, sometimes if you need to put in, 2 extra hours for a customer or client, that means you probably need to not do 2 hours of something else. So just recognizing that your time is finite and not trying to do, overtime every day because there's fires. Another thing I hear often is, oh, I never plan my day. I just jump right in to working and my inboxes and doing my work. And there's really not a good answer to this other than recognizing that I think that taking the time to plan your day does take time. I think it takes about 5 minutes. Some people take 10 to 20 minutes to do it. And it takes some discipline to, not be a slave to your notification brain. And, I think your brain on notifications, if you just start your day by opening up your inbox, you're probably not going to make really good decisions about what's valuable and what's important to work on, because you're going to kind of feel like, oh, the stuff that's in my inbox that's in front of me is like the most important stuff. So I think the best way to convince yourself that it's worth spending 5 to 10 minutes planning your day is to just realize that it's a really high leverage activity, and that you're going to make those 5 or 10 minutes back throughout the day, because you're not going to be wondering between each task what you should work on, and you're going to have a really good sense of what's important to you. All right, and then probably my favorite tip here is, how do you deal with needing to wear a lot of different hats in the work that you do? And my solution to this is what I call theme days. And so for each day of the week, I have a different theme. So on Mondays, I do administrative work. On Tuesdays, I do all customer-centric work, like answering support tickets, making small fixes that customers requested, reading customer feedback, that kind of stuff. On Wednesday, I focus on growth and marketing related work. That could be anything from writing new ad copy to implementing new analytics for experiments. Thursday, I do product work, so that's like actually building features. And then Friday, I set aside for time for planning, reflection, and talking with my team. And so this gives me a place each day to know what I should prioritize. So I know that like on Wednesday, that's my day to prioritize a certain type of work. And so it just makes it easier as I'm planning my days to prioritize. So if it's Monday and, customer requests, a small improvement to a feature, I don't feel that pressure to be like, oh, I need to do this today. I can be like, okay, I have a place for this. That place is Tuesday, and I can kind of cue that work onto that day. And for me, this really helps me feel less overwhelmed knowing that there's a day each week for me to work on different important parts of my work and my business. And obviously, your theme days will look very different depending on the type of work that you do. And there's no, requirement to say that like every day should be different. I think that that's relevant to me as the type of role I have. But you might say like 3 days a week are for, I don't know, writing content. 1 day a week is for like administrative stuff, and a fourth day is for something else. So you need to figure out what works for you and what the different hats are that you wear. But this is a technique that I found works really well for just about anyone who has to work, who has to wear a lot of different hats. That helps them feel a lot less overwhelmed. So yeah, that is kind of an overview of the techniques that I use for planning out calm, focus, and less overwhelming work days. And I think we're pretty much up on time, so I won't go into my grab bag of other techniques I use, and I'll stop here.
That was excellent. I learned a lot. I find that, as we were talking earlier, I'm a parent, so setting aside time to be productive is very important, especially now. So waking up first thing in the morning, earlier than anyone, and planning out my day has been the most effective way that I can get things done. And I always outline my top 3 things, like you were saying, just try to plan things out. I also found it really interesting that you can write a blog post in the middle of the day. I don't operate that way.
Like I said, it's really hard for me to not like check my inboxes and like get through that in the morning. For me, I feel overwhelmed. But yeah, I think it's different for everyone.
Right. Yeah, and that's important to point out because I think we hear all these things like you said, optimizing creativity first thing in the morning. But that doesn't work for everyone. So it's tailoring to what works for you. I did want to share the results of the poll we put up. We did have one person say that their typical work week is chaotic, lots of meetings, to-do lists. And then a few other people said busy but manageable, just need some tips and tools. So I think this was really good and tactical. Let's get into some questions. Alex Burkett, he's our co-founder. He had a question. What are some common productivity systems or advice you feel are actually not good, or at least that haven't worked for you? For example, he tried Pomodoro timers and hated them.
So I think that the answer here is that all of these techniques are very often personal, and the best thing you can do, I think, is experiment with them and see if they work for you. If Pomodoro timers don't work for you, great. I don't want to be I don't want to diminish people who do like Pomodoro timers, but I find that Pomodoro timers are like sort of training wheels for focus. So if you're like the kind of person who can't sit still and stay focused for 10 minutes, Pomodoro timers are a really good way to kind of build up that focus muscle. And I used to be a person who got up every like 5 minutes. Like I had to get up, like I couldn't stay focused. And that's probably when I tried things like Pomodoro timers, and they were helpful to me. But now if I use a Pomodoro timer, it's incredibly distracting. It's like, okay, I've only been working 25 minutes. Like, I need to keep going. Like, don't stop me now.
Right.
So again, it's very specific to you and your context and sort of where you are in your own journey of, trying to work better. So I don't think any particular methodology is all bad. You have to kind of listen to the people who are explaining, who are putting it out there, like, what kind of work do they do, and does that apply to me, etc.
Right. Makes sense. Okay. And then outside of planning your workday, what techniques or rituals have you found really enhance your own productivity? For example, sleep or meditation. What practices do you use?
Yeah, so for me, sleep is a really big one. Um, my policy on sleep is that I sleep until I'm done. So I don't use an alarm. I sleep a lot. I sleep like 8.5 hours, although there's been sort of a major disruption in that now that I just had a baby 3 months ago. But I'm actually getting back to that. And I think that it's easy to talk about a lot of productivity techniques, but sleep is like, I think maybe the most foundational one.
Yeah.
If you sleep well and are rested, you can just do so much more than when you're tired.
Do you use
And
a Aura Ring by chance?
I don't use any sleep tracking technology. So I could try it out. Yeah. But I've just found sleeping until you wake up is really great. And there's I think it's really hard to convince yourself of that, because for a lot of people, when they first start trying that, they're going to sleep like 10, 11 hours. And I used to do that. But over time, I guess you catch up on your sleep debt. And now I have like healthier sleep habits. But anyway, yes, sleep, super good. Everyone should do it. I do have a sort of daily meditation practice of about 30 minutes a day. But that's not something I typically talk about, because I think that that's really personal, and it gets into people's spiritual aspirations and stuff like that. So I typically don't discuss that too much.
Yeah, sure. On the topic of sleep, though, I found that, I thought these things were overrated, and I was like, well, as long as I get X amount of sleep, I should be good. But certain things like monitoring your heart rate, the fact that my heart rate might have been elevated at the beginning of the night when it shouldn't be, was an indicator that, hey, I was eating late or working out too late, and adjusting those little things. I noticed my heart rate would be lower, and I would wake up feeling less groggy. So productivity. Yeah, it's just super interesting, those little things. Not that it's a must, but I guess once you have it, you can't live without it, kind of thing.
Yeah, I think once you're sleeping enough, you can start thinking about how to optimize that. But I think for most people, just like sleeping enough is like the first challenge to surmount.
Totally. Yep. Okay, and then a question from Alex Diaz, who is a content strategist on our team. How do you manage context switching when working with multiple clients in a single week? First of all, do you experience that at all?
I mean, I guess for me, context switching is
maybe hacks.
Yeah, it's kind of like those hats. It's like I need to be focused on how are we growing and selling this product, and also like how is this like new feature that we're building work, and how are we dealing with the 200 customer support tickets that came in today or whatever, right? And for me, again, the solution to that is theme days. Just saying that there are certain days that I focus on certain things, and as a consequence, that means that on that day, I'm also definitely not focused on other things. And so knowing sort of your bounds and your limits for each day is kind of how I get around that. And the other thing that I do is I kind of mentioned this before, is in the morning, I do a lot more like notifications, like communications, like responding to things. And there's a lot of different contexts that are happening. I might respond to a question in Notion from a colleague about, something that's happening in our marketing team. And then I might right after that respond to something about like a product in GitHub and looking at a bug. And so I kind of like do all of that sort of like expensive context switching stuff early in the morning when I can easily do that. And then I usually take a break after all of that for, lunch. And then I have like the last part of my day where I can really kind of deeply focus on one thing.
Yeah, makes sense. Those make a lot of sense, especially if you're wearing a ton of hats. I mean, even in my context, I don't wear a ton of hats, but I think it still applies, and there's ways to fit those in. So, all right, well, those are all the questions we have. Did you have any final thoughts, Ashutosh, or anything that you wanted to say that you didn't get to say?
No, I think I sort of covered a lot of the techniques that I wanted to talk about in terms of how to plan out workday. And I hope that, anybody listening here who isn't planning out their workday will take a few minutes to just try it out. It's not that hard. And for those of you that are planning your workday, I hope you find some little techniques and tactics and ideas that will make it so that you're planning calmer, more focused workdays.
Yes, I'm all for that. Thank you so much. I do want to mention that this is our last office hours event of 2022. And typically we host these workshops twice a month, but we have an incredible lineup next year featuring speakers such as Tracy Wallace from Klaviyo, Ashley Faust from Atlassian. She was also a speaker at Inbound this year. So to stay in the loop, please head to our website, beomniscient.com/office hours to get the updates. And of course, check out Sunsama. Great talking to you today, Ashutosh. Thank you so much for taking the time. And we'll be sure to send out the recording and slides right after this. So have a great holiday.
Thanks.
Thank you.